So, Mark Perlmutter, thank you very much for being with me. Can I ask you to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name's Mark Perlmutter. I'm a American orthopedic surgeon. I specialize in hand surgery. I work in North Carolina. Um, I'm past president of the American section for the International College of Surgeons and currently a vice president for the Global International College of Surgeons. Um, Other than that, I'm just a country, small town orthopedic surgeon who operates on hands.
You have also been a volunteer in Gaza during the war, and but your engagement with Gaza goes back a bit, right?
My engagement with Gaza started in 2024 only. Um, I felt embarrassed that my country um, was buying or donating 80 plus percent of the bombs that were devastating children. I've done countless overseas mission trips, and I operate on children almost exclusively and have for 30 years, mostly in Latin America. But I've been to Sub-Saharan Africa and some places in Asia, but mostly Latin America. Um, and since I've operated on many thousands of children overseas, I felt it abhorrent that my tax dollars, my money, was being used to kill children inappropriately in the name of Judaism, when I knew that it was really Zionism um, and not Judaism that was, in fact, responsible for their murder. Um, and so on a week's within a week notice, I um, took standby planes in March of 2024. I took a standby to Miami. That flight was my UAE flight was canceled, and I took another standby to Chicago, from Chicago, Toronto to England, England to Frankfurt, Frankfurt to Cairo, and then I made it within 30 minutes of timing for a caravan that was going to drive through the Sinai for 15 hours to the Rafah crossing, which was still open in March of 24. Got into Gaza
Who
through
who
that
did you
open
come in
crossing.
with?
There's a wonderful group called the Palestinian American Medical Association, PAMA, and I contacted them 2 weeks before I left and said, listen, I'm an orthopedic surgeon. I want to go. I'm sorry, but our trips are all filled. And at the last minute, I mean, a week before, um, I was told that this orthopedic surgeon broke his ankle and couldn't go. Am I still interested? Um, I then said yes. I broke the news to my significant other. We had a fair amount of family tension over that, as you can expect, because although I go to Honduras, that prior to Ukraine, San Pedro Sula was considered the murder capital of the world, where I go in Honduras. And then, although um, uh, she, my family was more accepting with me going there than going to Gaza, where there was bombing going on, and understandably. Um, and and indeed, they turned out to be right, because when I came back, I had so much emotional and psychiatric baggage, uh, uh, probably PTSD, that um, my relationship with Amy was so challenged that she left.
Hmm,
Uh, we were together for many years, and she left me. a
sorry.
hundred percent my fault.
Hmm.
The things that loving couples should talk about. Um, I personally didn't give a shit about it. The only thing I cared about was, yeah, 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 yeah. But let me tell you what happened in Gaza.
Hmm.
You know, your personal things that are devastating you personally don't matter to me, because I saw something worse. And and that level of insensitivity was so wrong on my part, but so built up in me because it was a tragedy. As I mentioned to you off camera before, yeah, I was at ground zero on 9/11. I was at Katrina, a level 5 hurricane, the day that it hit. And I was in Haiti within 2 hours of the earthquake, maybe 4 hours. I was in Miami within 2 hours and Haiti within 4 hours of when the earthquake hit. And I went back every month for 5 months afterwards. And so I've seen pain. And I've done 40 surgical mission trips, and I've seen pain and I've seen devastation, and none of it, in fact, all of it combined, doesn't even come close to what I saw my first week in Gaza.
What was what was your first impression coming in?
We crossed the border. There's a combination of smells. Um, the smells were sulfur based. Um, it was a combination of, and it changed as you walked between the areas. Or drove through the areas. It was the smell of sewage because the sewage plants were destroyed on purpose as an act of war to raise the disease level. Um, there was decaying bodies and the smell of decay of flesh, the smell of sewage, and then the smell of sulfur from gunpowder, um, all of which created an olfactory cacophony of a sickening smell that still wakes me up at night. It was just beyond horrible.
I mean, as somebody who has been doing triage for a long time in crisis situations, were you prepared for what you were about to find?
No, I mean, there's there's a there's a difference between, like in Honduras, somebody's there's some the cartels and there's a gang murder, and you might see somebody come in who shot up really badly. Here in the ER, my first night with a bombing, 70 people would come in at once, and and these are not scratches. These are 70 people that actually lived through the bombing that were put onto an ambulance. It is not, these are not minor injuries. These are people without an extremity. These are kids that are burnt like sausages left too long on a grill. These are kids that are shredded like paper. Um, and it's the level of devastation in any one of these kids. Of course, adults will hurt too, but the children stick with you because they cannot be thrown from the second or third floor of a building and bounce like an adult could bounce. The same small piece of shrapnel that would uh, shred an adult's arm shreds a whole torso on a baby or a kindergarten aged kid. And so the level of devastation, not even counting the emotional part of seeing a baby shredded, um, is immeasurable. Um, and that's the one thing that stands out the most. With gang violence, uh, when I did my hand fellowship in Miami, which was then the busiest trauma center in the United States, people got shot and stabbed every night. It kept us busy. Um, through my time in Latin America, which is largely gang violence and cartel violence, um, same thing for sub-Saharan Africa, um, um, or the crushing injuries after an earthquake in Haiti, when buildings collapsed there. We still did not see the level of pediatric carnage that we saw in Gaza. Um,
What what was your sense of the people that were working there with you, the locals, the local doctors?
Phenomenal, phenomenal, phenomenal. Super dedicated. Medical students, which were encamped 15 miles away in a functional concentration camp called the Mawasi by the coast. They would walk 10, 15 miles every day just to work at at one of the functioning hospitals. They'd stay for a couple days, walk back, and then come back the next day. Um, and And that's just the medical students. Doctors abandoned their families to work at the hospitals. There was such an insane level of dedication to honor their Hippocratic oaths. It was immeasurable. All us American doctors were no less than perfectly humbled by the dedication and service that they provided. High levels of training. And these are doctors that are often just released from Israeli prisons where they were captured and tortured for many, many months. Um, and I can tell you many stories about that. But the level of carnage just directed at the healthcare workers. I mean, as we speak, there's greater than 400 Palestinian healthcare workers in Israeli jails, all without charges against them. We talk about the, many Jewish hostages, uh, but there is no less than 10,000 Palestinian hostages as we speak. Many hundreds of which are healthcare workers that remain in prisons as we speak without charges against them. And I've spoken to many of them that were released that were just horribly tortured while they were under Israeli control inside of Israel.
You do retell the story of I believe a medical assistant who was shot in the knee
Right.
while he was perhaps you can.
Yeah, his name is Tamir. He's in Egypt now. He ended up losing his leg, an amputation above the knee. Um, Tamir was in the hospital, in the operating room, operating on an injured young man who was not a Hamas operative. And he was an Israeli soldier, enters the operating room, orders the anesthesiologist, the surgeon to leave, or they would be killed. They did leave the operating room. Tamir, who's a nurse, an orthopedic nurse, was closing the wound of this person who was shot in the leg, and he refused to leave, was shot in his knee himself. Um, um, Other people continued to close the wound. Um, and then they put Tamir on the dirty operating room table. The surgeon came back in. Um, the patient on the table died. Um, Tamir was then very superficially repaired. He was then arrested in this hospital bed the next day, taken to an Israeli prison, given a juice box every other day, sometimes every day, kept for 45 days, and then blindfolded the whole time. His handcuffs were in opposite directions. He couldn't cross his body. He was he had to pee and defecate where he sat in prison. Um, they hosed him down, um, and on the 45th day, they let him go at the border, um, where he had to crawl 2 kilometers until he was seen, but he didn't crawl normally. They said goodbye to him by hitting him in the face with a rifle butt, an IDF soldier. He describes a female IDF soldier raising her rifle from her waist, the butt, and smacking him in the eye. It exploded his eyeball. And he crawled for 2 kilometers while draining the liquid from his eye down his cheek, and leaving a trail of maggots behind him because he never got any wound care when he was there from the bullet wound. And when we got him, he was in a coma. He had bed sores behind his ears and behind his head, something I've never seen in my life. His wound was cleaned by a Swiss nursing team, and they called us in as the surgeons to operate on his wound. After the first surgery, he came out of a coma and he told us his story. Um, and and he's in Egypt now. He hasn't seen his family since February or April of 2024. His family's still in Gaza, and they won't let them out to join him in Egypt. 20 some surgeries to try to save his leg, um, all of which eventually failed, and he had an amputation above his knee.
You became quite prominent for those of us who are looking at Gaza quite closely, because you were one of the first people to report on the killing of children by single bullet wounds to the head and to the torso.
Or with bullet wounds to both.
Can you?
And that's an important point. I'll share with you one story. And one afternoon, two children came in. Both were shot in the chest and head. Now, in the New York Times article, we summarized that of the American doctors that went to Gaza, 83% reported seeing a child shot in the chest or head. 83%. Now that's over a 1 year period of time in every single hospital that was still operating throughout Gaza. So that means it cannot be a coincidence. It's not like it's one rogue soldier shooting up every kid. So it's not like a pathologic person who's committing war crimes. It's a collective, because it's happening in every single hospital for over a year. And we all saw it. That doesn't mean we all saw it once. One doctor, by the end of the fellow who wrote the article, was able to cite 13 children he saw in 3 weeks, shot in either the chest or head. I myself saw many, many dozens of children shot by sniper rifles. And we all know what a sniper rifle bullet looks like. It's not the same as a pistol bullet. We don't buy the argument that Hamas were shooting their own children using them as shields. That's been so thoroughly disproven. And indeed, the father of one of the children that I saw shot in the chest and head, the father was walking with his kid to go get water. And he felt the kid pull out of his hand, thinking he stepped in a pothole or something. And he looked around for him, and he was several meters away. And then he heard a big bang. Whereas at first he was looking at his kid, and then he saw his kid's head get hit and explode. And he looked at the source of the sound, and there was an Israeli soldier climbing back into his Bradley fighting vehicle, or Humvee. He didn't actually say Bradley or Humvee. He said his military truck, giving him the regional version of "fuck you," something like this. It may have been a variant of this, but it was the Middle Eastern equivalent, or the Israeli equivalent, of a middle finger in my country. And the essence of it is that this kid was shot twice. The second time he was shot, he was already dead, because the first bullet went into his heart, exactly where I would put my stethoscope. The second bullet was on the side of his temple, when he was already lying dead on the ground. And the young father said to me, if they were truly after Hamas, then he should have shot me, not my son. Which is a true statement.
It's
Why do you think they're after I said, we've seen many children. He goes, of course, they want to eliminate our next generation.
Do you remember your first encounter with a child hit by a bullet in the head? Or
it was a couple days before then. There were children shot in the abdomen. There were young boys with their genitals being the target. Young girls got their feet shot off, and kneecaps. A lot of kneecaps. A lot of feet, and young girls. Boys, it was their genital or kill shots to the chest or head.
how are you? I mean, I guess you were talking about this earlier when you explained your private situation, but how is the medical community that has gone through Gaza and is coming out after having seen this? How are they coping with this?
Well, who says we are? Um, um, I told you that my significant other left me for several months because of my inability to cope with it. I have nightmares all the time. I hear children talking to me that I saw dying, raising their heads and saying, do a better job. Their parents who were crying over them are now looking up at me, speaking perfect English. Why couldn't you save my baby? Um, um, I have a photograph of a child the night that on my second trip to Gaza, the night that the earthquake, um, and I call it the earthquake because the whole ground shook from all the bombs. The whole country shook as if it was having an earthquake. 2:30 in the morning, March 18th. It shook like I've never seen a ground shake. The aftershocks in Haiti were not as prominent as the shaking of the bombs. Where there was no plaster left on my ceiling in my bedroom um, because of the shaking. All the windows were cracked by just the uh, by the indirect bombing. And when when at 2:24 in the morning, 4 minutes after I got to the emergency room, I saw my first dead child. And Congressman Darrell Issa, a U.S. congressman from California, who was Trump's assistant campaign manager, who had called me the month before uh, to meet with him to talk about a potential solution and to give him advice. So I had his cell phone number and I sent to him a picture of this child who was taking their last breath in front of me, actually, while I was shooting that picture. And I sent it to Congressman Issa and said, you have Trump's telephone number. Ronald Reagan stopped the bombing of Beirut by Israel in the early 80s with one stinking telephone call. Please call him and have him stop this. I have dozens and dozens of other children within meters of this child that are going to be dead in the next 20 minutes. And indeed, that night, I operated on 30 children. That one night, well, lasted all day and all day the next day, none of which survived. None survived. And we did amputations without anesthesia that night because we just couldn't get kids into the operating room. There were so many casualties. Um, there's so many mass casualties at this small community hospital that I was at that any major teaching hospital would have been overwhelmed. Even at the University of Miami, which had many dozens of operating rooms, they wouldn't have been able to handle what I saw just within hours of the breaking of the ceasefire, let alone the fact that it kept happening every hour since then throughout the night. Hundreds and hundreds of shredded bodies came in, and many died because we just couldn't get to them. Inside the emergency room, they died. And so I sent Darrell Issa this picture of a baby saying, please help me save the other lives. Um, and he sent me a text message that was the verbal equivalent of a middle finger as well. Um, so um, our legislatures in the United States who are prostitutes for the Israeli lobby money are not at all interested in advancing um, a solution for peace. They're interested only in supporting Israel's quest to take the land. And all this is about. This is absolutely not a Jewish versus Muslim thing.
And
This
I
is
want to
100%, I want your land and I'm willing to kill your kids to get it.
I wanted to ask you, because we have quite very little time, but I wanted to ask you a bit about your sense of Judaism as
Hmm.
this is sort of going
So
big.
this is not a Judaism thing. Judaism is a centuries old religion based in love and forgiveness and supporting your neighbor. Um, and as are all the Abrahamic religions. Um, Zionism, on the other hand, is different. That's something that's been around since the mid 1890s. It's a political movement, and it's a political movement that has evolved into I want your land and I'm willing to kill your children to get it. I'm willing to create the greater Israel only for the purpose of securing the natural resources in the area so that the perceived greater Israel will thrive for millennia, which is why they want the Nile, which is why they want the Jordan River, which is why they want Iraq and northern Syria and northern Egypt and all of Jordan. That is the map that Netanyahu showed to the United Nations when he came. He was showing the map of Greater Israel, not the map of current Israel.
Will
Um,
will you be able to forgive, I guess? How does one live with this? I mean, collectively in some sense, but you were particularly close to the carnage.
right. Well, forgiving is easy to do. Holding accountable is another thing. One can hold people accountable and forgive them. If somebody uh, comes in and murders my wife, I'll forgive them eventually, but I'll forgive them while they spend the rest of their life paying for it. And that's why I think it's important that we have to hold those accountable, truly accountable. That's why I testify to the International Criminal Court and International Court of Justice. That is why I think, and I'm trying to raise money for a program to hold every American legislature that took APAC money responsible for the carnage that they induced. Um, those that contributed to this, which is every American politician who took the money, who were silent on it because their silence was purchased, every American politician who voted to give almost $30 billion for military aid to Israel after October 7th, um, they all have to be held accountable. The blood that was on my shoes in the operating room, that same blood is on the hands of every American congressman who took money. I well, and what drives me and lets me put my nightmares in place anymore is the fact that um, we I have to assume a role different than the country doctor I want to be. I have to assume the role as an eyewitness to the largest pediatric homicide in my lifetime. We're trained to kill disease um, and to eradicate, for example, tumors. But the largest killer of children in my lifetime were bullets that my country bought and gave to monsters. Um, and those monsters have to be held accountable.
Mark, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Door always open, of course, and I hope you're well.